Jonathan, welcome to People and Legal.
Thank you.
Lovely to chat with you, and I know you've got a very busy schedule, so thank you for fitting us in.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So I guess one of the things that I wanted to is for our audience is to actually, I guess, introduce yourself and actually talk about your background and journey.
Sure. So, my background, I was born in Cape Town. I always joke at an early age. I was born at an early age, and I immigrated to Australia when I was 23.
Hmm.
And the first kind of part of my career, I worked in consulting, Anderson Consulting in the strategy area and AT Kearney. And then so that was kind of the first 6 or 7 years of my career. And then I've spent the last, I won't tell you how long, but the rest of my career, kind of building technology companies. And for the last two, I've run two listed companies, and I've been at NUIX now 3.5 years, and it's been a exciting, slightly crazy journey over the last 3.5 years.
And what actually inspired you, I guess, to sort of build companies in I guess in the first place and earlier in your career? What was the inspiration for that?
I've always liked growth. I've always liked thinking about market opportunities and thinking about how, so growing businesses, I think, to me, that's where the excitement is. How do you scale? What are the constraints? Whether you're a listed company, what are your capital, geographic, people constraints, and then how do you solve? I mean, I think I like solving problems. I like humans. I like people. So solving problems together with humans is exciting. And if it's growing, it's even more exciting because you're creating, value and impact. And I think that's probably growth gives you opportunity. Shrinking is never an exciting position to shrink a company.
Exactly. No, that's not a great place to be. So, I mean, in terms of that entrepreneurial journey you've actually had in growing and building companies, what sort of key skills did you draw on? What things did you actually were very useful to you in doing that?
So, I think that I almost look at there's an art and a science to kind of most things. And I think I've always tried to, if I then think about how I think as a person, I often try and encourage both left brain and right brain thinking. So when I think about the skills that I've learned, um, I was a musician and I used to play the violin when I was a
Oh, wow.
child, and yet I always liked science. And so, to me, I think being able to pull on the art and the science. So if I look at sales as an example, there's a very scientific way of how to sell. There's a right way to have, looking at what are my winning themes, how do you prosecute in the market, what, technically how do we sell? But then there's the art, which is the narrative and the story. And so I've always liked kind of the fusion of those things. And so, academically, I studied music. I also did an MBA. I did, a commerce degree, but I did economics. And so I've kind of always liked both sides of the equation, if you want. And so I think, again, even my academia, so I have a degree in finance, but I also, kind of think about both sides, if you want, of solving a problem. If you want.
And in that, I guess, in that journey in terms of building companies, that whole issue of scaling, because I see a lot of entrepreneurs out there trying, they start the business, they get to a certain level, but then they scale. I mean, what kind of challenges did you actually find in scaling businesses?
Look, I mean, I think, if you think about scaling, there are kind of a bunch of kind of fairly traditional. So first of all, you get to a scale where you need another set of infrastructural capability or capital to take you to the next level. So there's that type of scaling, um, which means that they kind of scale up. You're figuring out like what are my cost issues if you want to operate an environment. I also think about, geographic scaling. So how do you seed culture? If you're in Australia and you're trying to build out an operation in Europe or in Asia Pacific, how do you ensure that you can kind of have, Yeah, and I always think about culture as kind of the onion, the layers of the onion skin. So how do you have your corporate culture, which then has the appropriate local culture also, and how do you seed the corporate culture whilst kind of learn from the local culture? So I think then you've got geographic scaling, and then you've got product or expansion. So how do I take the offering that I've got? What is my minimum viable product, and maybe extend that out? So from a product offering perspective, but to me, it's always trying to think about how one gets growth. And yet I think there's an overlay also. And, the one overlay to me, which has been particularly important for me at NUIX, has been how do you overlay growth with doing good? And we've got our purpose statement, which was when I joined NUIX, which was finding truth in the digital world. And when I joined, my question was, well, who cares about finding truth if a bad person finds truth or someone uses that truth for nefarious reasons? So now our purpose statement is being a force for good by finding truth in the digital world. And what's amazing is that really has resonated with both our internal team, but our customers and our partners, which is, a lot of our customers are large law enforcement, are of service to society, are large regulators. We have 97 regulators globally that use our software. And those regulators wake up every day saying, how do I make this a more effective, efficient, functioning society? And we feel really proud that we have our customers that we can enable to do good, if you want.
I mean, certainly from people joining your company, I guess that would be like having that purpose state would actually mean something to them. Their work actually means something rather than sort of, turning a profit and doing X, Y, and Z. It's about actually getting customers and bringing on board and actually, doing good.
Well, I mean, it's been a massive shift. I feel there's a big responsibility on my shoulders, which is, we truly can make a difference in the world. We find bad people, we encourage good things, we have organizations that are upholding the law, and so I think that it's a massive advantage for NUIX when we go to market, when we talk about, truly purpose at work, when you wake up every day and you realize that you are truly helping society, you're finding the bad guys, you're, it makes a massive difference. And I think that means that when people resonate with a purpose, there is amazing things can happen. And I think we've done some amazing things at NUIX. And I think it's partly because we've got great people, but also I think the purpose has allowed people really to push beyond their boundaries.
I mean, having a look at your background thing as well, you're doing good outside of work as well. So there's some different causes and things you're actually involved in.
Well, look, in this world that we live in, the one thing I would love to be able to do is to be able to leave this a better world than I joined, and it's becoming difficult. I think the environment, some of the geopolitical issues that we see means that humans, individuals need to step up, corporations need to step up, because governments in some areas aren't. And so, where governments are dropping, I think individuals or corporations need to be able to stand up and say, we believe this is good. We believe, and I think, so, I don't think I do more than other people. I do, but I do try as much as I can to think about it. And certainly at NUIX, it's been a massive focus area for the organization.
Yeah. And on NUIX, I mean, I guess it's a very well-known name, but for those folks who are not across it, I mean, and the value proposition, etc., tell us more about NUIX.
Sure. So I'll start off. NUIX, we've been around now 25 years. And we started 25 years ago in the Department of Defense. We have our chief scientist who's still with us today, who's really been the brain behind a lot of the conceptual thinking at NUIX and some of the engineering, which was how do we make Lotus Notes searchable? That was 25 years ago. But if I roll forward 25 years later, what we have done really well is we understand data. And so to us, it's all about data. And we actually understand the DNA of data. We understand the binaries of data. which means that the granularity of data that we understand, I think, gives us a competitive edge in the 3 platforms we have built. So we built a data privacy platform. A data privacy platform is I describe it as an understand platform. Let me understand my enterprise data set. Where is my risky data? Where's my sensitive data? Where's my valuable data? And so we would use a data privacy platform before you get hacked to understand what you do with your sensitive data and your valuable data. Once you've been hacked, we've got a data breach solution, which says we can identify what's been touched, what the bad the bad actors found, and what are your reporting obligations. So that's kind of our understand platform. We've got a find platform, which is really our forensic investigation platform. And that platform allows you to take a massive data set and look for things which were typically in the past. Someone had done something bad in the past, and I'm looking for that bad thing.
Right.
But now we're starting to predictively analyze, well, if these are the 8 steps to create something bad, how do we predictively look for step 1, 2, 3, 4, and then identify something that might happen in the future that is bad? So predictively look for fraud or for some type of event that might happen based on certain algorithmic or data-based events. And then we've got our prosecute platform or our legal platform, which is once we found the bad event or we found some errors that someone might do, or we do e-discovery. So in our legal platform, we are probably the largest processor of data in the world for e-discovery. And then we have our review platform, which is once you've found the artifacts, then you can promote that to your review platform, and then the lawyers use that to prosecute if you want.
Interesting. So you've got, it's a very wide-ranging solution, but I guess, as you say, it goes back to data.
So it all goes back to data. And in fact, we built our new, so there's been a massive shift in the last 3.5 years where we used to sell components and we used to assemble these components to build solutions. And when I joined, there was a question which I asked, which was, well, why wouldn't we give our customers a platform that we've got the best of the components and we've solved that repeatable problem? So, if you're looking to do a forensic investigation, what is the best user experience? What is the best repeatable journey that we can show our users? And we built our Neo platform, and Neo has 3 kind of core components to Neo that I think makes us, one of the best platforms in the world. And the 3 core components are, number 1, we understand unstructured data, I think, as well as anyone in the world. And unstructured data is difficult. Structured data is much easier. You've got a database, you've got a unique key, so you can do an ETL, you can extract, transform, and load and understand that data. In unstructured data, there is no structure. And so we understand 1,000 file types. We can ingest and process massive data sets and make those data sets searchable.
Incredible.
So that's one core piece. In our platform, however, we've added 2 other pieces that I think make the platform really exciting. So we bought, 4 years ago, we bought an AI business out of Boston. When I say 4 years ago, when people could spell AI, and that natural language processing business that we bought out of Boston has been key to our platform, which allows us to sort and kind of refine the data sets before we do anything. So we built our NLP with our own models, which means that when we sell our NLP, it's our own. We own that AI. That means that from a responsibility perspective, we can show our customers how we've trained the AI on what data sets, how it comes up with the answer. So that responsible AI is super important to ourselves. And then the third one is we bought another business, which is now our automation layer. So doing kind of enterprise orchestration or automation means that we can now repeatably and forensically run a process and come up with the same answer multiple times, which means it has to be forensic, which means that I can automate a whole lot of processes which were previously quite manual. And what happens in dealing with big data sets and manual processes means that you have risk and you have mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And so automation has made a massive difference to how we think about our platform and how to really empower the human rather than replace the human. So we really think about how do we empower the human, and we built all of this on a deep learning framework.
Wow.
And what a deep learning framework is it allows us now to take any data set, and the bigger the data set, the more exciting for NUIX, because we really deal with, we are famous for massive data sets. And what we know is data is exploding. And so being able to very quickly reduce the data set, funnel it to a smaller data set using both, if you want, our own AI, and then, and what to us is becoming obvious is that the end of many of these processes means that we're going to take a small corpus of data and then run it through a Gen AI process.
Right.
And that Gen AI process, we either use our own AI to cull it down, or we are recommending certain AI tools. So whether you want to do translation or transcription or voice to text or any of those type of processes, we have embedded some of those AI tools that we vetted and put within our deep learning framework, or you can bring your own AI. So, there are thousands of AI tools that might do legal summarization or visualization of some type of aspect. And so again, we have built a platform that allows you to take big data sets, make them much smaller, and then repeatably use what AI process you want in a ruggedized, repeatable, efficient process. And our belief is at the end of the day, often that will be a Gen AI process of some sort. And NUIX Neo allows you to do all of those, our own AI, the AI that we've embedded in, and or your own AI for whatever purpose, because we believe at the end of the day, we hope that we can become kind of the picks and shovels of the AI revolution.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like that anybody who actually really cares and wants to understand their data in an organization and cares about their data, really, you're the guys doing the heavy lifting at the beginning to actually get it into certain sort of place, like unstructured and structured data in a set that they can actually then, and you've got your own AI process as well, so you can probably understand relationships and all the other sort of stuff you've got to do to get to a set that's actually usable by Gen AI.
So that's what we're starting to see. So for all our processes, you've got a massive data set, you're shrinking it down to a smaller data set, and then there are processes, whether you're promoting it to a review platform in legal, or you're trying to understand it or visualize it.
Yeah.
And visualizing this data set, we do different things in different solutions. So in I mentioned our forensic investigation solution. We use graph data. So we use like a link analysis process, which allows us to visualize different interactions and it's typically an entity or a human or a set of transactions. So we could say, well, what other person has used this Bitcoin address in a massive corpus of data? Show me who else has used that. What entities are they related to? And so being able to look at that link analysis, if you want, is a massive opportunity, again, in visualizing those data sets. But there are now more and more Gen AI processes, but you can't run 100 terabyte data set through a Gen AI process. So you've got to get it to an appropriately small data set and then run it through. And that's what our deep learning framework is all about. And so what we're seeing is those three solutions. We've got our data privacy, our forensic investigation, our legal solution. We are finding that more and more the next step is to run a small data set through a Gen AI process. That means that we're trying to understand it further. We're trying to visualize it. We might translate it. We might transcribe it. And by the way, we might transcribe it or translate it only whilst we're processing the data. So we can do that before, during, or after data processing. Gives us an extremely powerful tool. And that's why, again, those three solutions appear to be quite different, but they all hang off one key element, which is the better you understand the data, the better you can either understand your data your data landscape, which is a data privacy solution, or you can find bad things that have either happened in the past in your data set or will happen, or prosecute, if you want, in the legal.
I mean, even patterns, like if there's people, I mean, I'm just thinking from point of view of managing a practice and thinking to myself, if you want to identify certain patterns in a law firm, I mean, the data you're actually extracting from a law firm could actually be used in a number of ways to actually identify patterns of, who are the best performers doing X, Y, and Z, or how, how fast do cases get dealt with here. I mean, there's all sorts of patterns you got to identify.
So, I mean, if I start off with in the legal space, let's start off with e-discovery, which is kind of the big opportunity. And to me, when I think about e-discovery, if you take Nirvana, Nirvana is there are 10 or 20 documents that are going to win or lose the court case. So find me those 10 or 20 documents in the 10 million that you've got a corpus of data of 10 million documents. Yep. Find me the 20 documents. Now, if we could find you the 20 documents, you wouldn't need a review platform. Those would be the 20 documents.
That's right. Yep.
Now, that's Nirvana. For ourselves, if you've got 10 million documents, what we try to do is, because we understand the data literally at the binary level, our ability to find the data set, find a smaller data set, which might be, so assuming the data set that we can find, and here's the hypothesis, assuming the data set that NUIX presents is 50% of the size of our competitors. What is the impact to the e-discovery process? Well, actually what happens is the smaller the data set you promote into your review platform, the fewer lawyers need to look at it, and the less it costs you to run a review process. Right. It's much faster. It's probably more than 50% reduction of cost. And then you've got the ongoing cost of running the data, as most companies charge data under management in the review process. Right. So, there is a misalignment in incentives in the legal industry because there are some competitors, and many of our competitors will process data. However, their incentive is actually to promote the biggest data set into the review process. Got it. Or because that's how they charge. Yeah. So the bigger the data set, the more they charge. Yep. And so our view is, the only thing we care about is solving and getting as few false positive and false negative in that data processing phase, then promoting to the review platform. For ourselves, our intent is, how do we get the smallest data set? So to allow our lawyers to solve the problem faster. Yeah,
and better price as well. So the pricing's,
So the pricing, and again, my joke is, if it's free, you are probably the product. And so, our legal processing we charge for, we're proud of, and we believe is the best processing in the world. If someone gives you away processing, I'd be very cautious, because that outcome is not aligned necessarily to your end outcome, which is, how do I solve a case faster, better, cheaper, with the fewest documents, if you want, rather than the most.
Which goes back to the comment you made before, which is actually doing good.
Sure. So again, and our incentive, we are also a force for profit. Yeah. So, to me, profit allows us to invest in R&D, but, they don't have to be competing objectives. We can be a force for profit and a force for good. Yeah. And, the more and that gives us, I guess, a force for profit plus force for good might give us force of impact, if you want. But I think the ability to make impact, both good impact and impact to our customers, is super important.
Yeah. I mean, I guess through the conversation we've had so far, I mean, it seems like, one of the questions we always ask is in terms of what is from your view, what are people talking about? What's in the market? What are you seeing? What trends in the market are you seeing? And I guess a lot of topics you've covered around data and how AI can work, generative AI can work better with the smaller data sets. But what sort of trends, what are you seeing in the marketplace?
I mean, I am slightly biased, but it's all about the data. Yeah. The Gen AI projects that are failing are the projects that we are seeing our customers either can't find the data. Yep. So it's scattered across unstructured data. So it's very difficult to find. Once you've found it, you've got a whole lot of questions around, well, I've got to scrub it of PII data. I've got to make sure that it's clean. I'm allowed to use that. Yep. I've got to get legal to confirm that I can use those. Yep. Then I have to I've got to kind of normalize the documents because I might have 200 of the same compliance documents with slightly different versions or data. So you've got to train it on the right data set. I mean, I guess you could think of NUIX might be considered, the Ozempic of the data revolution, which is, how do we skinny down the data sets? Because the smaller the data set that you're training your Gen AI on, the more effective your Gen AI is. And by the way, the context windows are getting much, much bigger in training Gen AI, but making sure that you've got fewer artifacts, which are the correct artifacts. And so we have built our data curator, which is built off our NUIX data privacy platform using a deep learning framework. And that data curator, if you want, the whole intent of that is to be a backbone for a large enterprise that wants to use Gen AI, but wants to be able to find the data, enrich the data appropriately, and responsibly train your Gen AI so that I can say, show me what you've trained my Gen AI on so that I can figure out how it's come up with that answer.
Right.
And if you're a large bank or a large insurance company or a large law enforcement organization, any heavily regulated organization is going to need to be able to understand, how have you trained my AI and how do I know that it is responsible? And I guess from our perspective, coming from a forensic world where everything has to be forensic, we come at solving these problems quite differently. And so our own AI is all forensic. You'll come up with the same solution. Our models, we open up the models. And by the way, not only do we open up our models, but we allow the user to be able to, you don't need a data scientist to train our NLP. We allow the user literally the ability to say, I need 100%, it's around accuracy. I need 100% accuracy, or I'm prepared to have 95 or 90, and your corpus of data shrinks or increases depending on the accuracy that the user trains the model.
Right. I mean, effectively, you're making, you've got any Gen AI model, and that's one piece of kit over here. But effectively, really, the heavy lifting you're doing over here and making what this can work with a lot better, a lot faster, a lot better, and making results a lot more reliable.
Correct. And again, so to me at NUIX now, it truly is AI or die. I think about the world. If I simplify our AI view at NUIX, is that Gen AI does one thing, which is it makes human decisions 1 to 3% better. So if you think about like an organization as an organism, if you think that we have 450 people at NUIX, if I can make each decision each person makes 1 to 3% better, what happens is the organization, or if I convert that into an organism in a Darwinian sense, it responds slightly better to the environment. The organization makes strategy just slightly better. Each time you create a document, it goes through a ideation phase, a production phase, a QA phase. Every time I have a marketing or press release, we run it through different personas. When we think about how we use Gen AI, each decision is 1 to 3% better. That means that I think the sooner you jump onto this technology, it's the improvement multiplied by time that gives you the delta between where you are and where you should be, if you want. So the sooner you get on that, the better. But that's table stakes. What NUIX now does is NUIX says, well, to differentiate yourself as an organization, you have an enterprise data set. And that enterprise data set, we believe you've got to govern. So we govern it by understanding it using our data privacy solution. You've got to, in governing, you've also got our legal and our forensic investigation solutions. But then how do you leverage that enterprise data set? And to me, that starts getting super exciting. How do I, and that was what you were talking about, how do I look at how people are selling and what words are they using to sell?
Exactly.
Or how do I understand risk that might be hidden in a set of processes? Or so, to me, there is a golden thread in any organization. And that golden thread starts with the customer and ends with the customer. And I truly believe that AI and the data that's hidden in your organization can kind of expose that golden thread.
Exactly.
And allow an organization to leverage their enterprise data set, whether that be through supply chain optimization, but it's everything, supply chain and strategic sourcing or strategy, evolution. How do I test these strategic concepts?
Well, that's right. You can actually test models. You can actually test models. If I do this and this and this over here, or if I employ these people here, if I expand geographically over here, what's it going to look like?
So what we are finding is that three core platforms that we've built, our data privacy, our forensic investigation, and legal, all are now starting to use a deep learning framework to say, well, I understand we are trying to solve data privacy, but actually I can visualize this data, or I can give you different sets of insight, or in the forensic investigation space, I can take this data set and run it through. So yes, I'm looking for the bad guys. So I found, but actually, whether it be through link analysis or visualization, I can just do what we do better because we understand data better.
Yes.
And so, again, I talk about we can translate. So when we are people doing data privacy or forensic investigation or legal processing, by the way, language, we're working with big law enforcement, lots of secret service organizations, large international organizations, and you're looking for something and you don't want to translate everything, but you need to be able to translate and understand, or transcribe or do voice to text, et cetera, and that access to be able to accessing the data at that binary level in any language, in voice, in video, it gives us a massive advantage in the world that we're playing in, and that's where we're starting to see the growth opportunity.
Yeah. It's been an amazingly educational, interesting session, Jonathan. I could talk with you for hours about this. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. It's so educational. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right.